Well, welcome to another lesson of the Focus on DatoCMS course. I am Marcelo Lune, the Headless Creator. As always, get a hold of me right there, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. Feel free to send me an email with questions, comments, ideas, whatever you have. Send me an email. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Today, I'm going to show you how to work with roles, custom roles, actually roles in general, and specifically custom roles in DatoCMS, and how to use roles to implement your content governance. So we're going to be touching upon a lot of things. But before we get started, you know how this works. I'm going to go ahead and show you here, headlesscreator.com. Let me move some things around. And real quick, for those of you that are watching live, please feel free to get your account. It's 100% free. Go to headlesscreator.com. You'll have access to not only this lesson on demand in about an hour after we go live, but you'll also have access to the entire course, the Focus on DatoCMS course, with lots of lessons, but then you'll have access to many more lessons coming up, a lot of courses. We have a variety of courses, including the one that I geek out on, Content Modeling Weekly, where I show you a whole bunch of different content models. In fact, we're up to 44 different content models that I show you, and you have access to the Miro boards as well. So go to headlesscreator.com, get your free account, click on sign up. It's 100% free, and believe me, you won't regret it. So with that said, you know how it works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and restart the intro, because the on-demand version will have absolutely no marketing whatsoever. So I'm going to see you in just about 10 seconds. Well, hello, and welcome to another lesson of the Focus on DatoCMS course. I am Marcelo Lune, the Headless Creator. As always, get a hold of me right there, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. Feel free to send me any questions, comments, emails with ideas, whatever you like. I'd love to hear from you. Today, I'm going to show you how to work with roles in DatoCMS, specifically how to create a custom role. We're talking about role inheritance. We're going to cover a bunch of stuff. And then how to use that to implement your content governance, right? So we're going to be covering a whole bunch of stuff. So why don't we jump in and get started? Let me arrange my screen here just a little bit. For those of you watching live that have any questions, please type them in the chat. I will answer them as I get them. So let's go ahead and show my screen here. All right, perfectly. Let's go ahead and we can close this up here. All right, let's start with Miro. And what I want to talk to you about, first of all, it's the concept of roles and the hierarchy of roles in DatoCMS, because you need to understand this before you can go ahead and design your governance and roles to support that governance. So having said that, we start out way at the top with DatoCMS, and then we're going to jump into DatoCMS and you'll see where all of this is in there. But at the top level, you have an account owner. So in this case, it's going to be me. And the account owner has access to projects. So think of DatoCMS as the actual headless CMS. And then within it, you can create multiple projects. Now, each of those projects, you can see here, project 1 and project 2, right? And name them whatever. You'll see in my case, I have Headless Creator and Test Project. But for each of these projects, you can have environments. So you have multiple environments, right? So I have a master environment and a staging environment. Now, environments is where you have your entries, assets, and workflows. So that means that staging environment could have the exact same thing, or it could have different entries, or it could have different workflows or different assets. Now, having said that, roles, where do roles fit in? Well, roles fit in at a project level. So you have what they call roles, and then you have collaborators. So if we go here, oh, I think I moved it by mistake. If we go here, you have collaborators that belong to a role. So collaborator is just a user, right? A user that you give access to on the system, but you assign users to projects, okay? That's where you're assigning users, which means that I can assign myself or collaborator to project 1, but not to project 2. And you do that at the global role level. That's where roles come in, and you have project permissions. We're going to go into what kind of things you can do. Currently, there are two default roles. You have an admin role and an editor role. It comes with that. Then, depending on your license level in DatoCMS, you can create custom roles, and they limit how many custom roles you can create. So you talk to your CSM and see what that's like. But basically, you can create custom roles, and it depends on your licensing level, how many you can create. Now, for each custom role, right here, remember, roles belong to a project. So I can have a role here, and I could have a different role at this project, and assigned collaborators to a role in project 1, but not to project 2. Now, in roles, you can configure project-wide permissions, environment access permissions, environment permissions themselves. So in other words, this is which environment do they have access to, and this is what are the permissions within that environment. And then there's the build permissions. That's for your developer, like for creating the code. Now, one step, it looks below, but it's a one-to-one relationship, is you have content permissions. But what happens is, remember, roles are at the project level. But at the environment level, you can assign content permissions that says, what kind of content models, content types do they have access to? And not only what kind of content types do they have access to, but what can they do? Can they delete entries in there? Can they add entries? Can they only work with their own entries? That happens at the environment level. So I can have a role, which you'll see pretty soon. In fact, let's do that. Let's get into, let me show you. We're going to be creating a couple of roles. We're going to create a blogger role, and we're going to create a data manager role. And I'll explain what those are in just a second. But you can have a role, like a blogger role, that in the master environment, they can delete certain content type entries. But in a different environment, they can't. And that's why the content entry level permissions are set at the environment level, whereas the roles cover global project permissions. Now, don't worry about it. All of this is going to make sense in just a minute. We're going to jump in and do it. But I do want to cover one thing. So just remember, account owner is at DatoCMS level. Roles belong at the project level, and content permissions belong at the environment level. Very easy to remember. You have that hierarchy, and then you have two default roles, admin and editor, and then from there you can build other roles. And collaborators, they're just users. That's all it is. So keep that in mind. All right, so having said that, there is one more thing I want to tell you, and that is inheritance. They have the ability to have a role, for example, have an editor role, and then create another role, in this example, a blogger role that inherits from editor and could override or give additional features or permissions, or block certain permissions. So you can say, look, a blogger will have everything that an editor has, but I also want them to do X, Y, Z. Now, a translator will have everything that a blogger has, but only to this locale. So then they can have access to everything that a blogger has, but only for the Spanish locale, let's say. And that's kind of neat, because then you can just change, you can manage most of your permissions up here, and they will be inherited all the way down with, as you go down, certain permissions that are overriding the permissions above it. So, you know, kind of like object-oriented programming kind of thing. Okay, so that's inheritance. So remember, just to recap real quick, we have an account owner, we have roles at the project level, we have content permissions at the environment level, and then roles can inherit from other roles. Once you figure that out, you're good to go. Okay, so let's make sure I covered everything. So what I'm going to do before we jump into what we're going to do today, I want to show you where you find all this. Alrighty, I'm going to make sure I'm showing the right thing, and I'm going to take a little bit of sip of water here. All right, so where do you find roles? If you go into, normally you'll be in content, and you have to be an admin for this, obviously. But go to settings, And under settings, you will find there's three things you want to be aware of. Is you have roles right here. This is where you create roles. So you can add roles, and we're going to go through this in just a minute. Then you have collaborators. Those are your users that you